Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of the Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been on this journey with us since the very beginning. So we thank them from the bottom of our hearts and hope that we will continue on down the same path. This is a pretty darn good path. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, the Sonic Surgeon, for his sponsorship and contribution of our intro and outro. He is an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found anywhere that good music can be found. Now, tonight we welcome for the first time Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger. They are co-producers of the new documentary, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. Need we say more? I think it is awesome. So we are looking forward to looking at their trailer this evening and hearing what they've got to, basically got to tell us. It's always fascinating for me. But in order to participate in tonight's show, you're going to have to head on over to, let's make our way down the list. Facebook, News on the Flip Side, Outer Realm with myself, Amelia. I was going to say myself and Amelia, but I'm tongue-tied tonight. UFO, Paranormal Radio, and United Public Radio, Canada's Most Haunted. Then we jump over to YouTube, which of course is the Outer Realm, UFO, Paranormal Radio, and UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials. And if you like what you see, please give us the courtesy of subscribing. We really appreciate you, and it really helps us a lot, and it's always appreciated, and you guys are very appreciated, so we love you. So I see people are chiming in. Hey, Tamara, Wayne, Summer, Michelle, Zachman. Ooh, hello. Wow. Bubbles look tired today.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Bubbles has been cleaning.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. There's nothing like a new cleaner that comes to the house, and not the person, the product.
No, I was going to say, what? And you're
I
tired?
love it. I'm not going to give the name because they don't pay us to talk about them, but it smells like almonds and it's all natural. I love it.
Oh, I like that.
And it works. Their whole line is safe for children and pets, so it's really making me happy. Even the other one that I got earlier for granite, you can clean your countertops and you don't have to I'm laughing at Wayne, you don't have to worry about washing the chemical off. It's food safe. It's not a chemical. Wayne, right? Sherpa has been cleaning today as well. Yeah, cleaning, laundry, catching up. Yeah,
Sherpa as well.
Well, it took me a good chunk of time to do my dining room. That's a lot of wood. But yeah. Tired all day. Yeah. You had an edible the night before. Yeah, you need to be able to sleep through those. So you have to make sure you're getting 8 to 10 hours with something like that, right? Isn't it like CBD?
I think you need a sativa. Make sure it's a sativa. That will help you. A sativa helps you sleep. Gives you disease. Apparently. Hopefully I got the lingo right.
Yeah, if I take CBD oil, I'm out cold for like hours.
All right, link sent off. So, hey, Rich.
Hi, Rich.
So, do we want to just go over the bio, just in case it kind of pop in real quick? And we're unprepared.
Yeah, I'm looking at Wayne's comment.
Mudding,
that's why.
sanding, vacuuming, washing the floors with bad water.
Okay. You might as well not wash the floors if it's that. It's like that. I just take straight vinegar when you have a problem. But tonight, the co-producers of the new documentary, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, we are discussing the interviews from researchers and eyewitnesses with extraordinary stories and evidence, as well as historical accounts of Bigfoot and the significance within the indigenous culture. Please welcome to our show Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger.
As we wait.
As we wait.
There
Yes,
we go.
but we got it out.
Hey, we got one. Woohoo!
We got it out.
Hey,
We got it
Brett,
out.
how are you?
I'm good. I'm here.
Hi,
Good,
how are you?
Are.
Sorry,
Hi.
I had the
Are.
screen closed off. I didn't see you.
Oh,
Oh, hi. Good evening, Nocturnal Frequency Radio. I don't know if it's
Hello.
Steve or if it's Alex.
I'm going to take a bet it's Steve. Alex usually comes in
Tobe
as
should
himself.
be joining us shortly.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. I love it. I'm really looking forward to this. So we don't often have a lot of people come on with Bigfoot. It's happened probably a handful of times in our 3
Hi,
years.
Steve.
Well, yeah, and I don't know why, because we have, well, we do have a long waiting list, but we're pretty much open, to everything. Outer Realm covers everything, but amazingly, we don't get asked by many to come on. The ones we've had have been very good, but we're just like, where are they all? So it's like, yeah, we've got one. This is great. So it's really tough, I think, with things like, I think Bigfoot's probably the most popular of the cryptids, or are they cryptids? That's
They're
the big
people.
question.
They're people.
Oh, wow.
See, I love
They're
that.
fuzzy. They're tall, fuzzy people, ancient
Tall.
people.
I love it.
Okay.
I
Something
love it.
like that. That's kind of a tease, I guess, for the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. No, I'm really looking forward to it, because we have a lot of people who have had experiences and such. We'll have to get into that. And hello.
Cool. There's Tobe.
There he is.
Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Wow. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I was just explaining to Brett that, in our few years of doing this, we have only maybe had a handful of people who have come on to discuss the subject of not just Bigfoot, I think, cryptids in general. And it's not like we've never been open to it, but it makes me kind of wonder the field of study, just how big it actually is, or maybe isn't. So we're going to get started with the trailer. Does that work out for you guys, just to get
Yeah.
everybody on the roll? Okay,
I think
so we're going to go.
that's the way to go.
We're going to come up. I'm going to come in. I'm going to mute everybody. I think everybody should probably mute. Okay. We're good to go.
I'm looking at this giant figure, huge, 8 feet tall, non-human gait. I'm trying to classify what this thing is, but it's not real. And I know what it is, but what it is not real.
The arms of these things went well below their knees, unbelievably long arms.
When I looked up, there was a young male looking at me.
Something's going around my tent. It stops behind me, and then contact.
We really tried to get pictures, but these things seem to outfox us.
Something is leaving footprints.
As you start utilizing the data and you start seeing the data tell the story, the whole story unfolds right before your eyes.
The way it pulled its little one, its young, behind it with its arm. I mean, I can't even put it in words. It was so unreal.
Knowing about them, they seemed too intelligent for me to consider them as something you could go out and hunt like an animal.
That is, whoa.
So these were brought here.
I had one client talk about how muscular it was and how broad its shoulders were and how it's just was in awe of this incredibly majestic creature.
You will always have that with you. You will always remember that moment.
When he was walking away, I called out to him, "You're the most beautiful creature in the world. Please don't go."
I was that person. I did not believe. I just thought it was a myth.
Open up your minds, because they're out there.
Wow. I'm hooked.
Thanks.
I'm pretty speechless. That guys. Hold on. Where'd
Oh.
that go? Click stop sharing and something else comes
I
up.
stupid me put my mute on and I never take it off because I'm an idiot, even though I do this twice a week. That was amazing. I want more.
Thank you.
It was really
I
well
want
done.
more.
Beautiful
Yeah.
image. My gosh, the video is just like superb. Really, really well done. So I guess how we're going to lead off here, I think the best way to do it would just be to say humble beginnings. How did this come about? Has this always been an interest? Whoever wants to start, you'll find we're very round table like, so let's
Okay.
go.
Cool. So I'll start off and talk about the film, and then maybe Tobe can start talking about how he got into the world of Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Excellent.
So the way that we got into it was we started out as narrative filmmakers, and we'd done a couple of films earlier on, and those were great and a lot of fun, and throughout that time period, Jill, the producer, and I, the writer and the producer, and I had always talked about doing a Bigfoot documentary because we grew up in Oregon. We had an interest in it. And about 10 years ago, we were working with some folks on another film, and they introduced us to a couple of, a couple of the legends in the Bigfoot community, if you will, like Todd Neese and Peter Byrne and Ron Moorhead. And so we met them at a conference, got to know those folks, and we thought, someday we could really do this because we've established good connections. And so, long story short, when the pandemic hit, work slowed down, and we thought, you know what, now is the time to do this, to get out into the woods, away from everybody, and do a Bigfoot documentary. And so we thought we'd have it done in about 6 months, and it took about 2 years because one thing led to another, and we followed breadcrumbs, and we traveled the country, and we ended up getting it done. But backtracking a little bit, very, very early on, in fact, I think the first day of shooting, we met a man named Daryl Adams, who we were actually very interested in meeting. And as fate would have it, he was at this conference we were at. And Daryl and Tobe had a really, I don't even know how to describe it, an amazing thing going on down in Central Oregon. And we wanted to be involved in their story. And so, long story short, Daryl connected us with Tobe, and we immediately knew we needed to bring Tobe on as a co-producer. And I'll let Tobe take it from there.
Please.
Thanks, Brett.
Brett, thanks.
So this started about the mid-2000s. My son and I found what was either a hoaxed track or stage track of some kind in the middle of an icy trailhead near the town of Thurston, Oregon. And it really didn't matter to us because I was fresh off a divorce and had some time with my son out in the woods. And so I was looking for something to pick up steam with a 4-year-old, I think he was. He actually found the track. It was about a 14-inch human-looking track in the mud headed into the Blackberry Rambles in a spot that was more or less known for juvenile delinquents that, wanted to smoke a little reefer and skip school. So I thought, well, they're probably making tracks out here too. So we took a little photograph and ended up going to a church at that time where one of the directors of a movie called Sasquatch, which was loosely based on the Patterson-Gimlin film up in around the Three Sisters Wilderness area here in Oregon. He was kind of retired from the showbiz, but he was nice enough to look at the photograph. And he said, they're real. And if you want to meet somebody that has actually seen them, I know this river guide. And so meeting this river guide was really the first time I sat down with somebody and looked them mano a mano. And he brought a track that day and sat it near the museum park bench. And we just traded stories. I had a lot of questions for him. And he said, I've seen more than one. You can do that, And I'd tell you the rest of the stories, but they're far too weird and you'd never believe me. And that really sunk in. That took me immediately back to when I was sitting down with my dad watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind and just hearing, Richard Dreyfuss's character get sucked into this world as, you know, potential abductee is what happens.
Mm.
But there was this kinship to that mystery of what if these aren't just stories. And I got that from this river guide. And he was willing to let me come into his world. He was kind of a recluse. He probably still is. And before I knew it, I was out in the woods with a stranger, you know, sitting in the icy rain of the Cascades above Leesburg, Oregon. And from then on, I was just hooked. I knew that I had the time to do it. I knew that my son was willing to entertain part of his dad's craziness to go out in the woods. And once we started to have experiences, I wanted those to stay powerful. I didn't want to just have tiny experiences either, because I'm an adrenaline junkie. And so without belaboring the history here of 15 years or better, I can tell you that witnesses are classified in my mind into two groups. I think most Bigfooters would say that. They're either flesh and blood or they're something else. Maybe it's like that in the ghost world and the UFO world. Probably not, but in the Bigfoot world, those are the two camps, and they don't really get along too well. And so the first 5 years, it was all, I want to meet these guys, like trading baseball cards. I want to meet the Meldrums. I want to meet the, you know, Ron Moorhead types. And oh, by the way, those two men are diametrically opposite. And I found myself going more towards the crazy side, towards the woo side, towards the paranormal side of Bigfoot. And the reason I did that is because I was getting results. And what I found is there's this classification of a witness that claims that they have these sightings multiple times. They quite literally have Bigfoot in their own backyard or in their property, or they know where to go where there's a clan or a family unit. And oh, by the way, as my friend Rich says, this is not a rare phenomena. These big feet are everywhere. And so I began to find that out by going to these private addresses and literally embedding myself into these strangers, these new family members become my family, and waiting for the phenomena to present itself. And so around 2018, after, you know, looking into this since the mid 2000s, I find myself out in the Umpqua Wilderness in Cottage Grove, Oregon, at the mecca of not only Bigfoot extended experiencing with Daryl and Cindy Adams, who own this farm, but also this cluster effect of other strangeness that it's hard not to call it like a window area where all the phenomena comes in and coalesces around the Bigfoot phenomena. And so Brett saw a small documentary that we did on YouTube called The Alien Bigfoot Connection. And that's when we got involved. And I saw his work, and he saw how earnest we were. And that's how we got started.
I think that's fantastic. My gosh, so many questions, because there's a lot of theories with respects to, like you made mention of the alien Bigfoot connection. There are some people that do believe, because they disappear so fast, that maybe they're coming in and out of portals. What are your thoughts on that? You mentioned it. I'm just rolling with it.
Yeah.
Answer.
Take that one away, Tobe.
Well, we try to save this for what's happening now, because they're filming part 2. So that's what that's about. Okay. But my book is called The Al Moon Lab. That's what the name of this property was. And, you know, previous to that time, strange things had started to happen in the woods that were unexplainable. I mean, most people that look at Bigfoot look at it through the lens of understood science, Newtonian science. And they do that for a lot of reasons, mainly because of funding, which is something I didn't figure out till, you know, about 5 years ago. That's the most important thing to a scientist, to keep the money coming in. And fringe science just doesn't do that, not yet. And so, but most people that believe in that kind of science, accepted science, will talk about strange things like disappearing tracks. That's a pretty common one. And I've been around extended experiencers properties and had them confront me on that. And we're talking about tracks, single lines of tracks coming in almost on a tightrope, which is how most people, I believe, that Sasquatch ambulate. They walk about a 4 or 5 foot gait in between each step, left and right, about a size 14.5 to 15-inch barefooted track. And then they'll suddenly disappear in a snowdrift as though they've just been swept away by the blowing snow and, you know, floated into the breeze. So that works out for a little bit of time. But then when you talk to witnesses, say, no, I saw the thing disappear. It went away untraditional. It went away in a portal. It went away in a flash. It went away in all sorts of crazy methods. So those are the kind of things that I'd heard about. And those are the kind of things that we're familiar with in Cottage Grove. So that's, you know, that's why this story has to be layered in between 2 chapters, because you can't just come to people and tell them that this stuff actually, you know, disappears in front of your eyes like that.
I agree. Especially when you have a lot of, you know, the orb sightings that come in and around wherever you seem to find these beings. So, I mean, they are all over the world. They all have different names, but different species, because we're all individuals, right? I mean, we're the human race, but we're all very different, come from different walks of life. Is it the same with these guys?
It's the same. Yeah. I think it's exactly the same. And, you know, although we don't have photos and video of different species, I think that some of the stuff that's out there, and in fact, some of the stuff that we feature in our film, have a little bit of variation. I mean, we certainly know that they're different colors. There's the skunk ape in Florida, which has been described as being a little bit different. There's a famous photo of a skunk ape. If you just type in skunk ape on in Google, you'll see it, and it's kind of got more of an ape look to it. Although they have been described as similar as to the ones you'd see in the Pacific Northwest. There's some in the Midwest that have kind of a jaw that kind of comes out, and they have lower canines that stick up a little bit. The ones in Alaska have been described as being a little bit different. So yeah, I think that's entirely possible. I mean, I've heard, and we talk about this a little bit in the documentary, how they have, you know, every color from brown to red to black to gray to, you know, if you want to talk about the Yeti, white. People have even seen white ones here. A couple of guys that we interviewed, Chad and Austin, they described theirs as being cinnamon colored. So yeah, they're all different shapes and sizes, and they have different personalities too. And I think that's the important thing, is that, you know, and that was one of the goals that we set out with, you know, the documentary, was to describe these things as beings, as maybe a type of people and not monsters. And, you know, we've heard everything from trickster and a sense of humor to very aggressive. The one thing that we don't have any accounts of are people being, you know, brutalized or beaten up or assaulted or
that's true,
you know, killed by them. We do have many reports of them throwing rocks at people, but strangely enough, those rocks never hit anybody. So
right.
You know, so maybe they'd be great in the Major League Baseball or something. I don't know, but they've got a good arm. Yeah. But you know, and that's what's really important to us, is to really kind of flesh out that character and create that character. And like Tobe said earlier, that's 2 films, that's 2 movies, because these guys are complex. They're very complex.
I would think at least 2. Right? You could really dig with these.
Oh yeah.
I saw a video clip that was sent to me a while back, a couple years ago, from Canada, and it was a gentleman who was speaking, like a researcher, and he was working with one specific group of them, and he taught them how to say his name. For example, his name was Mike. He goes, Mike, you know, it was just being very repetitive. And it sounded like, I mean, if you believe the clip, that you could tell, like there's some kind of a really deep undertone with it. But it basically, he comes out and says, Mike. And over time, this series of videos is, this guy communicating and teaching speech. So can they speak? Do they have the capability to speak English? I would think it's very possible if one of them wanted to interact with you and learn. But what is your thought on, obviously they can communicate with one another because they do it. Language?
Yeah, okay. So this kind of goes down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I know exactly what you're talking about. This Mike Patterson, he's up in Ontario,
Okay.
and he's got all kinds of really incredible stories. I've even heard, I don't know if it was Mike, but I've heard that some folks have put out chalkboards, and they've
Right.
gotten written responses.
Right.
And I mean, all of this is subjective.
Right.
But what I can say is, this is kind of a tease into the second film, is many, many people across the country and maybe across the world experience this phenomenon called mind speak. And it's really kind of scary when it happens to some people, but they will hear a voice in their head that is not theirs.
Well,
and it's
telepathy,
in English.
basically.
Mm-hmm. It's
right.
Basically that's what it is.
Right.
And so I don't know. We don't know how they're doing that. We don't know how they're using English or the native language. Some folks say that they communicate in images and images only. Other folks say that they actually hear a voice. There's a story out there about a man who had a gun in the forest, and one of them asked him why he had a gun. Clear and plain as day in his head, in his mind. So, that's the English part of things. Ron Moorhead goes into their own language, which is called samurai chatter.
Right.
And he's got, the famous Ron Moorhead Sierra sounds that he recorded back in the 1970s. And, that particular language that he's recorded, and it is a language as qualified by Scott Nelson, a former naval cryptolinguist. He's done all the research on it. They've got something going on that they're using to, some sort of language that they're using to communicate. Whether it's the same, across the country, across the world, I don't know. The sounds are very similar. We heard it in the Midwest, and it was very interesting. It was just brief. It was kind of like a quack, quack, quack back and forth. It almost sounds like two people arguing about something. And it does sound like samurais. It kind of has that like old kung fu movie kind of
just waiting for the lips to move. It's like going at the same time.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like this. It's really kind of interesting.
Right.
So they definitely have an advanced form of communication. There's no question about it.
Right. And let's get into obviously they do things to try to other ways of communicating. Tree tapping is a big one that people talk about. I've got a family member who's got 100 acres out near Algonquin Park, which is in the eastern part of Ontario actually, and they have them up there. And he woke up, we had a caretaker on the property, woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark, and he can hear these random knockings that seem to be coming closer. And ironically, we just had someone on the show who was giving their opinion of this. And I'm like, okay, don't go out and do this apparently, because they're going to look at it as a sign of aggression. And this caretaker is just 65 years old, is going, I am not going anywhere. I'm just going to stay in this building. And, it's quite fascinating because you'll hear sometimes them tapping from other areas, and they have found nests and everything up on this property. So what are your thoughts? Do they have certain other ways of communicating that seem to be like I say, I'll use the tree knocking, stone throwing you mentioned. Whoever wants to take it.
I'm not so sure they're hitting trees, given some of the things that happen out in the woods in Cottage Grove. On one of the occasions, the property owner and I were in an area that Brett has been that we call the Almoon Wilderness. And we were walking roughly about 75 yards apart over a point it's a pretty open forest with some underbrush. But we're just outside of eye contact, and there was a ridge between us. And as we walked down the slope between us, almost exactly between us, was 3 sharp, loud wood knocks. And it sounded like a Louisville slugger hitting the side of a tree. That's exactly what it sounded like. Very crisp, very loud, and between us. So there was nobody else there. I don't imagine that there was even a Bigfoot standing there with a tree limb hitting the side of a tree. I don't know what's going on. I think that we go to that excuse that, yeah, there's the sound of wood on wood, but there's not always that. Some witnesses describe hearing jackhammers in the woods, hearing a car door slam, which is probably one of the most underreported, most common things that happen before a Bigfoot encounter, is the sound of what sounds like a car door slamming only a few feet from you in the
That's
deep brush.
crazy. So you hear the projecting sound?
I don't know. When you have a sighting directly after one of these strange sounds, it makes you wonder exactly what's happening, because one of the things that we chronicled, and Brett probably heard us talk about nauseam, is the sound of clicking, or the sound of booms, the sound of knocks. And they weren't exactly classified into an order of, hitting wood or hitting the metal shop on the property or hitting the ground. It was always very unique, but it sounded like something going through or passing through an object, and then you would hear the distortion or the vibration of that object happening. And this could very well be the same for these trees. It's not really a traditional answer that I'm looking into, that what makes those sounds. Maybe they do just hit trees once in a while, but I think it's a little more crazy than that. I think something else is happening here that, was probably uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about.
Amelia, can you get that?
Yeah, got it. Hi, Adriana. Is that maybe a portal opening, the sounds?
I was
That crack?
just about
Yeah.
to say that.
Perfect.
About to say that.
Yeah.
We're communicating through telepathy with the
Telepathically.
audience right now.
Right,
That's
Yeah. So lightning superheats the air and causes thunder, right? So that is a very reasonable theory that, when these portals are opening, the portals have got to be using some sort of advanced energy, like an instant advanced energy. So that could be where that's coming from. I mean,
It would
we
make
get
sense.
the sonic, we get the sonic booms from jets and everything else. So we've seen that being demonstrated in nature.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, I was in the Almoon Wilderness one time without Tobe, and I was there with Jill and a friend of ours, and I was doing some tree knocks. I found a big, huge, heavy piece of oak or something, and I was doing these tree knocks, and nothing was happening. And this was taking probably over 15 minutes. And finally, I was like, "All right, is last but not least," and I just took it all like I was swinging at a baseball, and hit this tree real hard. And not less than about 10 seconds later, I got a response, and it was just like Tobe was talking about. It was loud, it was crisp, and it sounded like a Louisville slugger, maybe a Louisville slugger mixed with a rifle. And it's the second I heard it, it sent shivers down my spine, and that was it.
That's the way it sounds in the paranormal as well. When something's coming in, you'll hear that same pop, that same boom.
Sound.
When
Interesting.
It is. It is.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you about that. Is it Amelia?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you describe that a little bit more? Because it's not too often I get to hear from ghost hunters or people that look into the supernatural.
I'm not a ghost hunter, but I'm a medium and a remote viewer. But that has been my experience with spirits and sadly malevolent entities as well, where you'll hear that pop, and it almost sounds like, when your TV's got static and it just cracks. It can be really loud at times. It all depends how they're coming in, how large they are, how many are coming through. And sometimes I've even seen almost like a current go through.
That's about right.
The middle of the room.
Right.
Yeah.
We've had
You'll see a flash of light, and it's confusing because people who are into ufology will claim that it's ET, and then the paranormal side, you know, they have issues too. We all do in this field, but then the paranormal side will say, well, no, it's not ET. It's, you know, it's demonic, or it's a spirit coming through from the other side. But regardless, something is using that energy to manifest a portal and come through.
No, we've had people say that when they hear these popping sounds, sometimes it'll even sound like a bit like it's tearing. But if you were to look, let's say if it was a dark room and you see all these little sparkles, you know, like little sparklers. There's been reports of people saying when they're hearing that sound, they're seeing like little sparkler lights.
Yeah, like shocks. When you get a shock on your finger, it's the same kind of
Exactly
thing,
like
and you'll
that.
see that twinkle.
And then other times they could see the atmosphere looks like it's distorting a little bit. So it would look almost like a heat wave coming in off a sidewalk on a really hot day. It just looks a little bit distorted. So those are all the different types of things that, you know, I've spent 2 decades doing it, and that's pretty much the norm with what they say. So it's just like yeah, Adrienne, glittering in the air. It's
Glittering, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to explain it.
Yeah,
And these are
last I
people
looked, there
from
aren't any lightning bugs inside the house. So
these are all people from different walks of life who describe the same sounds and seeing the same thing at the same time as they're hearing these sounds.
So when a witness has a sighting, it's profound, as though they've had a spiritual experience. Now, they haven't necessarily seen the supernatural happen when they've seen Bigfoot. Most of these things are roadside crossings that last less than 5 seconds in the dark. And yet in this film, these people are transformed. It's not like seeing, you know, a silverback gorilla. It's not like seeing, you know, something crazy like an endangered species of some kind. They see something that basically tells them that the rest of the world is a lie. That's kind of what happens to them. And I don't know, Brett, do you want to speak on that? Because I think people, you know, that are interested in this topic, they don't understand the narration behind the witness as far as what happens to them as far as a mental breakdown or mental shift.
Yeah, thanks, Tobe. We really want to try and put the audience in these witnesses' shoes as much as possible, and that's so difficult to do. The best way that we knew how to do it was to have folks talk directly to the camera, and we feel like that immediately establishes a bond with the audience. You know, and the audience can begin to trust them, and they can look into their eyes, and they can see that these people have been, like Tobe said, profoundly affected by what they've seen. The only way I really know how to describe it is if, you know, and this may not be applicable to some folks out there, but, you know, I remember when I saw my first bear in the wild, or my first whale, or something in nature that was extraordinary. And, and you know, those types of sightings and stuff, you kind of build yourself up to. A fox, you know, the first time I saw a fox or a wolf or whatever, you have a buzz, you know, it's an adrenaline hit, especially when you're close to something like that. And you remember it and you think about it over the course of a few days. Same thing with a UFO or whatever. This experience of seeing a Sasquatch is multiplied 100 times, 1,000 times for people. And it's also like, if we wanted to go a little bit darker, there's folks out there that have witnessed something traumatic, you know, a serious accident or something. And it's something that
it imprints on you, basically.
It imprints, exactly.
Yes.
It's really seared into your brain. And, you know, for a lot of people from that day forth, they might do things differently in their life. They might drive slower, for instance, or always stay on the sidewalk or whatever. And so we're dealing with the same kind of a thing. And for a lot of folks, that turns into a post-traumatic stress disorder. It turns into a trauma that keeps them, you know, as lifelong avid hunters, as people who hunt with family members, you know, going back generations, these folks won't go into the woods anymore. And these are big, you know, big hunters. They're strong men and women. They're comfortable in rural environments. These are folks that would sleep under the stars at night. You know, they're not really afraid of anything in the wild, and they carry protection with them. And when they see something that's so big and so strong and so muscular, you can't be armed enough, you know, for these folks. So that to me really says a lot about what these people have seen. And when I hear an eyewitness account like that, I don't question it. I don't question it because, you know, coming from the narrative side of filmmaking, it's really hard to get a professional actor to pull off a performance like that, let
Actions
alone.
speak louder than words, don't they?
Yeah, yeah,
In
and
many,
you can
many
see it.
ways.
You can
Yes.
see the hand shaking. You can see the lip quivering. You can see
Mm.
the eyes watering.
Mhm.
So, you know, there's no question in my mind that these people are not mistaking a bear. They're not mistaking
Mhm.
a guy in a suit. You know,
You're either
so
going to be terrified or you're going to be in awe. We had
yeah,
Captain Paul Watson on the show from the Sea Shepherd Foundation, and he said, you know, the very first time, like nothing really shook him. He goes, the very first time I had a whale come close to the boat, and I looked into that whale's eye. He goes, it's something that you never, ever, ever forget, and it changes you. So I think basically what you're saying is like these events, they change you somehow. It's
yeah,
one of those things that will come through into your next life. You know,
yeah.
it just leaves that imprint in time and on your soul.
That, and you nailed it right on the head, Michelle. Eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yep.
And we have an eyewitness, Mark Parker, who made eye contact with one. And
Wow.
you know, we all know that when you look into the eyes of something with intelligence, you're looking at that soul. And
Mhm.
Mark was scared to death after his sighting. You know,
Mhm.
so I mean, like literally frozen in fear, petrified. And
Mhm.
many of the folks that have had these experiences where they haven't made that eye contact, or they've you know, they've done a hand gesture. You know, there's a famous case of a guy that was being mocked by one that Tobe can elaborate on. You're never the same person. You're never going to be the same person, and that can sometimes lead to an obsession. And in some ways, that obsession can become unhealthy. To try and, you know, either see that again for therapy, or you turn it into something else that you know, a different kind of obsession.
And how many people do you feel, because, you know, all these people you've interviewed, how many people do you think hold back? Because you look at the Patterson film, that thing was, they've never debunked it. And, you know, they got ridiculed for that. How many people don't talk because they don't want to, you know, like I've seen an interview, you know, with one gentleman who was affiliated with that tape. And he goes, oh, I was just told repeatedly, we were just fakers. This was just fake. All of this was fake. A lot of people don't want to come forward for that reason.
Yeah, we're trying to change that.
And but that's part of the reason. The other part too is it changes everything once you start holding that story to be something that you want to talk about. If you bring that story home and start telling your father-in-law, telling your wife, telling your kids, telling your bosses what you saw, and you don't care about the ridicule, now you're in a different category to where you're an outcast. You've made a decision that you're going to change your life and have a whole new set of values to where you live outside of this box. And that's exactly what happened to Roy Neary in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He left his family. He goes off on this wild mission to Devil's Tower and then hops inside the craft. Bigfooters are no difference. A lot of guys that hang out at these conferences are all like me. They've chased after this, you know, giant dirt monkey for a long time, out there looking for more than proof, looking to have some kind of experience with them, and they've given up a lot in order to do it. And it is tantamount to an obsessive nature in order to understand how to nurture these experiences. But you know, people ask me if I would have to do it over again. Well, I probably wouldn't change anything. I probably would have done it tactically different and looked into these extended experiencers so I could get closer sooner. But once you find out that, you know, the matrix is real and that you can take the red pill and you can actually experience the impossible, then the rest of the world is kind of boring.
I agree.
Yeah, it's like that in the paranormal as well.
Everything's
Yeah.
connected. Everything's
Yeah.
connected, right?
But you girls, you ladies probably feel the same way, given what you do. I mean, don't you find that you have a subsect of friends that know the lingo, they know your worldview, they know how to fit into what you're doing, and then there was your old world before you got into this. I mean, so there's probably a discussion to be had like that. Would you ladies do it over?
Yes, because I worked in missing children and I helped bring a lot of children home. So for me, I wouldn't give that up for anything.
No.
I don't care who I lost along the way. That is much more important and more valuable to me than anything. I worked crime for years before I got into the paranormal side. And I wouldn't give it up, and I haven't. I still do it when I need to, and I still have cases, but I lost a lot of friends along the way. I didn't say anything about what I did till I was in my 40s. So I lost a lot of friends, especially devout Catholics. They dropped like flies, you know. Oh,
Thank you. Just
it is what it is.
you
You get past it
prioritize, right?
after. Yeah. Well, you can't do the work, and especially with missing kids. I tell this to every medium. We talked about this last week too, that if you're going to get into that work, you have to give up your time. I was on call 24/7. You don't go to it when you feel like it. You know, if they're going to a medium, you're usually their last hope. So
That's true.
yeah, so you give up a lot of social time. Sorry, Michelle.
Oh no, it's fine. The paranormal is just, it's a breed of its own, you know. Like I'm fortunate, after 2 decades, I'm versed in pretty much, I made a point. I always say I'm your student, you know. So I'm versed in many, many things, but it all comes down to, for me, just to helping people, whether they have something going on in their lives or in their home or not. Something is leading them to think that they are, and that's where you have to step in and use, you know, logic and whatever it takes, just to help them, empower them. Really, they'll figure it out. It's a lot of it is mindset. You just need to know that they're not alone, and I think you can attribute that to any field, because, you know, when I work, you know, with people with respect to ufology, it's the same idea. I have to say, every now and then, the whole Bigfoot thing will rear its head. You know, we have people who've seen them. I have people who've sent me pictures of what they think is Bigfoot or what they think are dogmen. You know, you sort of get involved, and I like to say it's more the supernatural more than anything. It's paranormal. It's just one very small aspect, I think, of otherworldly. You know, like I'm probably more of a history nerd more than anything else, and spend a lot of time, you know, doing that and making associations. So I don't know. I think you just have to have your hand in everything. You have to be knowledgeable in everything, because everything connects really in one form or another.
Can I just say something? You are so humble, Michelle. When you talk about assisting everyone, she's extremely humble, because she gives up every minute of her free time for that. What you don't see, and I think a lot of people see that, because I see it, not just because we're close and we work together, but I'm sure a lot of people see this. You have maintained your strength through all those years of working on the dark side.
Oh, thank you.
You haven't, but it's true. It's absolutely true. You have been able to be strong and not fall into that. See, Adriana agrees with me, of course. But definitely, because I think a lot of people who get into this field where you're helping others with demonic attachments and malevolent entities and so on do fall prey to that darkness.
Yeah, or
So
I think so.
Lot of, yeah,
but maybe
magic
that's
stuff.
Something that darkness sometimes are aliens. You know, the Christians think one thing, the ufologists think another thing.
That's another
just like
show.
dealing with Bigfoot. Could be an alien, could be a real live, like, you know, like you may have mentioned earlier, could be real live, living, breathing entity.
Is that
Not
the
even entity,
Neanderthal
human, like-
theory, or is that something else? I'm green when it comes to Bigfoot.
What was the question?
Sorry, is that when you say that it's possible, Brett said it was possible that they could just be humans or people. Does that come from, there's a theory out there that Neanderthals and the line from there, and is that what you were saying?
You want that,
Yeah,
Brett?
that's that goes back to more of the aper side of thing, and like we talked about earlier, the Bigfoot community is kind of divided into two halves, and the scientists that are researching Bigfoot, Sasquatch, like Dr. Meldrum, for instance, their theory is that it's a relic hominid. It's something that could potentially date back to the gigantic Pithecus blackie, which was a large ape that was discovered in China. And even though they only have, I think, just the jawbone, right, Tobe? They don't even have the full skeleton of it, but they somehow, with just a piece of jawbone, were able to figure out this thing was like an old-fashioned Bigfoot, if you will, 8 to 10 feet tall, so on and so forth. But, and anthropologists have talked about the missing link for a long time. I think that's starting to close a little bit with some recent discoveries in the last few years, but who knows? Bigfoot could be a relic hominid of some sort. In the Bible, for instance, there is all kinds of talk about giants. The whole giant thing is a whole nother show.
Oh, yes.
There's been giants discovered, in North America. Lovelock Cave is a great example of that, probably the most famous example of that. So who knows? There certainly is a possibility that they are just flesh and blood. They don't go into different dimensions, and they have, supernatural abilities.
Brett,
Yeah.
talk about Marcia's work. We don't really talk about her much, but that kind of goes into what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you might be able to cover that just a little bit more, but I can touch on it. So Marcia Moore, who's featured in our film, she's an anthropological artist, and she's done a lot of research on these cultures that will have elongated head shapes. And there you go. There's one of the models she's made.
Yeah.
Some of
Very
the evidence
nice.
is pointing to the fact that some of these elongated head shapes were not created with boards and over time. I don't know the
binding.
exact term.
Yeah.
With like
Right, skull binding. Yeah.
Here in the Northwest, we had the Flathead Indians, and the Flathead Indians would, from the time the baby was born, they would put the board on the head and whatnot. Of course, we've all seen the National Geographic picture of the necks.
Yes.
But there's a lot of evidence to show that some of these head shapes were potentially natural. And so, and Ron Moorhead personally told me one time he was in a museum in Peru, and they took him into the back room, and the guy says, "Here, I want to show you something." And he pulls out a drawer, and there's a 10-foot tall skeleton back there. And Ron says, "Huh? What's this?" And the guy says, "Well, we can't put that on display. It would scare the public." So, I think the truth is kind of under our noses. Yeah, exactly. Says who, right?
Yeah.
I mean, big deal, right? Big deal. There was giants,
Right.
I don't understand why.
How many have the Smithsonian destroyed? How many bones?
Well, that's another story about how somebody witnessed them dumping them off a ship in the ocean.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's
Yeah.
all over the world. There's evidence of them found everywhere. So with your thought being based on the fact that let's just say that Bigfoot is a living, breathing being, which I believe there's many parts of the world that, let's just take North America. You know how dense some of our forests are in some areas, how many cave systems that we have. They could get lost and never be found so easily. But you have people hunting these guys. Hunt to kill. They don't care, dead or alive. They're taking them in. Some people have claimed to have shot some. I think in California, it's actually illegal to kill a Bigfoot, if I'm not mistaken. Like it's actual murder. This is how they would look at it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in the Skamania County up here in Washington, you're not allowed to harass them. And I think there's a no hunting.
Because you'd want to harass something like
right, no harassing,
punch your
no
lights out.
harassing
the hornet's nest. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's how they worded it.
Wow.
I've seen a couple of these signs around in interesting spots up here underneath Mount Rainier, and they say as much. You may wander into Sasquatch habitat. They seem very official. I've seen park rangers walk right past these signs as though they've approved them. I have one of them saved that let's just say it fell into the trunk of my car accidentally. So, you know, you don't know where to classify this stuff as far as the government knowing about it. In the documentary, Brett secured a conversation with somebody that was an insider in the military. He's all shadowed out. It's very difficult to get people to go on the record about that stuff.
I bet.
But in general, you know, if you can find somebody who's retired or feels safe with you, they may just give you a map. One time I was given a map by a witness by the name of Don in the town of Coos Bay, Oregon. He was working for the Bureau of Land Management as a tree painter. He would blaze the side of trees with an orange stamp so the loggers wouldn't take it down. And around 6 a.m. up a place called Paradise Creek Road near Elkton, Oregon, he wandered into a Sasquatch on an old skid road, standing up, bending down, standing up, bending down, about 50 yards away from him. And he figures it was foraging. He said it looked like a 10-foot tall and a 10-foot tall man in a fur coat. He went back and he made the report in the little town of Veneta, Oregon. And of course he was mocked. And a couple days later, the secretary met him in the parking lot and gave him a tube. And inside the tube was an official map. And it had plotted since like the 1940s, the whole coastline of Oregon, all the way from Gold Beach to Astoria, different sightings, 5 different sighting types. You could see one, you could hear one, you could find tracks. And his was even plotted on the map as though they kind of took it seriously privately. So what's the point is, well, privately, somebody's keeping tabs on this. And maybe they show up at these conferences and have a little notepad and are watching presenters, but generally they're keeping to themselves. They don't really have any questions for us. I could see why. We don't really have a whole lot to offer them in general when it comes to evidence. We have a few tracks, we have a few handprints, we have some hair, but unless you can get close to the phenomena and actually get to know the culture of Bigfoot, because if they have language, we can assume they have a culture of some kind. And if they have a culture, well, they have rights. They have possibly human rights. And, you know, that gets into the whole thing of, you know, undocumented people living out in our wild.
I agree. I agree with you on that. Like I said, there's just too many places that they could be hiding. I had put this up also. Amelia, can you get that? We have like listeners who are on like thousands of different servers. So
Yeah,
they don't
that's why
see it,
you
they just
see
hear
it sliding up. Just in case says it is illegal, pardon me, to hurt or even disturb Bigfoots all over the
to
USA.
hunt them. Yeah.
It's a federal law to protect hitherto unidentified species. Yeah, and Tamara says, I don't think you can kill them in Canada. Yeah, you can't. You can't even carry a gun here. So
yeah. So no, that won't be a thing.
No.
But somebody else who wants, I'm just going to go in the Wayback Machine a bit just to hit on a few comments before we get too further ahead. Tamara, also Amelia.
Yeah, thank you. I've heard them in Northern Ontario, Canada, hitting trees and fighting at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's a bit unnerving. I used to work security. I'm out in the middle of nowhere without people around fighting.
What the
That's
hell
the first
can you be
time
watching
where
in the
have you
middle
been
of
hiding
nowhere?
that? You've been watching us for 2 years. We're just
nothing out there,
hearing about
Tamara.
that right now. What the
I know.
hell?
Why they've got you out there? It's craziness.
Wow.
Also, Wayne had asked a question going back to the fur.
Wayne says, with respect to the coloring, has anyone you've interviewed made mention of these beings having a winter and summer coat, like white in the winter and different shades of brown in the summer months?
That's a great question. The short answer to that is no, not really. I've heard some whispers of longer and shorter hair, you know, which makes sense, but I have not heard of different coats. I have heard of people talking about how they go gray. some of the elders go gray.
Like the rest of us. Yep.
Yeah, like exactly. Like you can't just, they can't wander into like a pharmacy and grab some
L'Oreal
hair coloring.
No.
Yeah, some L'Oreal. Yeah. Plus they need like 15 boxes of it too. So
maybe a couple kegs.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. But again, yeah, I can't say unless Tobe's heard
Well,
stories.
yeah, I've heard of literal coats. One of the lesser cool things talked about from witnesses, you don't hear it much these days. I don't think that's because it's not happening. I think it's still happening, but Bigfoot's in coats, Bigfoot's in hats, Bigfoot's carrying a backpack.
I'm gonna start crocheting
come on,
beanies
really?
for
That's just
Bigfoots.
Bigfoot's dragging
fantastic.
a sleeping bag. Absolutely. I mean, part of the gifting process, Bigfoot's in a fedora. I've heard that one.
Oh, that is just too cool.
I want in on that.
Even dogmen smoking cigars in trench coats in Skinwalker Ranch. So, I mean, it gets wild real quick if you allow it. But here's the deal.
Right.
If we're talking about a group of people and they're able to wander into the dump, like we talk about in the movie, and they find a garbage bag full of old clothes that were supposed to go to Goodwill, they may take those clothes. Part of what happened to us is something that we call gifts of significance, where if you talk about something, that object will appear in a random place specifically for you based upon what you just spoke about. We chronicled that for over a year and a half. But Bigfooters will talk about that, outside of the woo. They'll talk about getting clothing of some kind, either a small shoe, usually with a muddy patina, as though it's been found in the river or something like that. But then you get the occasional person that said, no, the Bigfoot had on, a red plaid shirt. It was ripped out like the Hulk, and only part of it was fitting the arm, which would make sense if you're talking about something watching humanity, sitting maybe from a distance at a campground.
Emulating, maybe.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That is the first for me. I'm going to start crocheting beanies. I like that.
Okay.
Beanies for Bigfoot.
There you go.
Yeah.
Michael Kennedy says it's obvious that it's all connected. The UFO phenomena, cryptoterrestrials, excuse me, sorry, sheep sisters,
Shifters, I think he's trying to say.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes,
Autocorrect is a
okay.
bitch. Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Satchmo the Yeti, shapeshifters. He corrected that. There we go.
And he also makes mention to find a John Stasco Jr. That's up in one of his others, another comment, apparently, who is very versed in this sort of thing. So there you go. Please, here we go. Please tell the guests
about John Stasco
Jr. There you have it.
Have them reach out to him. Okay, I'm working my special powers.
Okay. All right, John Stasco Jr. There we go. Leave it up and write it down.
I'm learning a lot. That is too cool. Clothing. I can't get over that.
And Tamara says, when I asked what the heck were you doing at this, she was, I was guarding a closed resort.
Like The Shining?
Yeah, kind of like that.
The Stanley Hotel, Tamara?
like the Shining Hotel, one of those.
Oh my gosh. Was it winter?
Insane.
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot.
Oh my god.
I wonder if they have names. If
they do have names. Yeah, you hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That is
They
just
have names
amazing.
that humans will give them, or they have names that they will send to you via telepathy.
Like that TV show with the Sasquatch. Remember that comedy? I can't remember the name.
Oh, Harry and the Hendersons?
Thank you.
Yeah, Harry.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I thought you were trying to make reference to another research show that was on. I can't even remember the name of it, but it was definitely comedic. Okay. That totally got me off track.
I never watched that. Sorry. My brothers did. They were heavily into, well, we call them Sasquatch here, but they were heavily into Bigfoot.
Well, if you think about getting back to the coat thing, which is what I wanted to initially say, if you look at a Yeti, in the Himalayas, they're white, but they're in a snow environment, right? Or northern parts of Russia, things like that. So could it just be more of a chameleon thing, like a blending thing? with their coats? I mean, mind you,
Yeah,
you think if they were in the forest, you'd think they'd be green, but
yeah.
but being dark, camouflaging.
I think that's a big part of it. Mel Skahan in our documentary talks about how he found a nest and he found hares in that nest, and they were, I think he said 3 inches long, although in the documentary says they were about 3 inches long.
Right.
I don't know how that translates to centimeters, you guys. Sorry. But
We don't either, so don't feel bad.
the hares were rainbow colored, he said, which is interesting. So there's this idea that, like, for instance, polar bears have hollow hair. It just kind of reflects light. So, Bigfoot might have some sort of a camouflaging kind of hair, fur, something like that. That,
like a fiber optic.
Yeah,
That's
like fiber optic
interesting.
that bends light, and something that they're able to manipulate. And many animals do that in the wild. We know that. I mean, there's animals that glow in the dark. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that if it is just a flesh and blood animal, that it has some of these advanced features.
And most witnesses don't describe fur; they describe seeing hair. They describe it as a hairy thing, a hairy man, a long, hairy beard.
It's long. Yeah.
It's not an undercoat kind of situation. They can see the skin underneath it. They can see where it's shaved down from where, moving their arms and in their knees and things like that.
Or in
So
the chest area.
Yeah.
Yes. So going into this film, you obviously you go in with a certain mindset because it's stereotypical, right? It's just like, this is the stuff you hear, we all see some of the documentaries or other TV shows, which I always tend to watch documentaries before I get into too much of the TV shows, because I always say documentaries are for education, TV shows are more for entertainment on an average. Don't shoot the messenger, pretty much is. So with that being said, were you surprised by any of the stuff that you found? Like, what did you go in? What was your expectation? Like, what was your belief system going in, basically, and how did you come out?
That's a good question. I think for us, and I speak on behalf of Jill and Mike Ferry, who was the cinematographer on the project. I think we went in prepared for some pretty strange things. I don't know that we were shocked by anything. Talking to the Army intelligence analyst and finding out some of the things that's going on internally within the government was upsetting. It was shocking. The paranormal scope, I think, was unexpected. The things that they're able to do or reportedly able to do was very interesting. So this film originally was just going to be one film. And what happened was we started accumulating so much data as far as the paranormal is concerned. It occurred to us after our first edit, which was close to 5 hours, that we should really make this thing 2 chapters. And also, it was kind of for the community as well, so the Apers could have their film and the Woo could have their film. But, that was surprising. I think there was a few things. I think the other thing too that's kind of surprising was I didn't initially think that they were as common, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, as they are. And I went into this thing thinking that they were really pretty rare, like maybe a few per region, maybe a pod or a clan or whatever you want to call it. And that doesn't seem to be the case. They're far widespread and they're not all that rare.
Wow. And how about you, Tobe?
Factoring in the pandemic was something I didn't plan on. That was an unexpected thing for the world. But to have the opportunity to do something amazing like this with amazing people, Brett and Jill are the real deal guys, and Mike as well. And to be allowed a window of time in order to do something beautiful like this. I mean, even with tragedy comes beauty, and there is probably no better example than having time off work like the rest of the world and wandering out in the woods and creating something like this. And it's not on, lost on me to say thank you to Brett and Jill for that opportunity. But, I'm just kind of thinking about it now. What an amazing experience to spend 2 years building this narrative out. And, I want everybody to go out and see this movie and be blown away like I have been, because just from the trailer, you get an idea of the cinematic scope.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, watch
It's
the
really well
film
done.
and, don't even become a believer. Like, we interview a guy in here who's just, I wish he could have got more camera time, but you got to sit around a campfire with a guy named Henry Franzoni. And Henry was the one that taught me that if you want to see Sasquatch, all you got to do is go to the crazy place names. He wrote a whole book about it. And all you do is go on a map and just find crazy place names near creeks, most likely, or near prairies, on hillsides, places named after like Spirit Lake, or Scary Mountain, or Baboon Creek, or Skookum Meadow, things like that.
That's
And
interesting.
that's where you go camping, and that's where you're going. Amelia and Michelle are going to go together and have an experience out in the woods.
No, I'll
this
go camp
summer.
anywhere for stuff. Oh, I'm fearless. Oh yeah. I always say I'm either fearless or I'm just a meathead, because I'll just do it.
I'm fearless, but I just don't like camping.
Yes.
I'm
Well,
prissy.
you guys can go glamping then, or you can just go for the evening, do a night sit.
There's
Like,
still
that's what I
mosquitoes.
suggest with a lot of people.
I'm really prissy. I like the hotels. I'm bad.
Oh no.
Michelle
I
sleep
love
anywhere.
research. Yeah,
Michelle,
I'll
get
do
out
it.
there.
I've been to
Yeah.
different parts of the world. I don't even care.
There's got to be like a Skookum Creek, or
Yeah.
Scream
Oh,
for Your
no.
Life Meadow, something like that. And that's where you're going to
Adriana
go.
go with Michelle. She just said I volunteer. Yeah, because she was in that crazy forest with you. That's why.
Oh, the Hoyabatsu Forest. Oh, I
Oh, good
guarantee freaking
Lord.
to you there's Bigfoot up there.
Yeah.
Crazy Romanian Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So this was Amelia, can you get this? You want me to get this?
Absolutely. Nope, I've got it. I was just taking notes.
This is Michael about John Stasko again.
Yep, Michael Kennedy, John Stasko Jr. has documented an instance where 20 people and 4 cops saw a Bigfoot on a tall power tower for over 2 hours. That's in a
Jesus.
report. He has many more with multiple people documented. Wow, this man, is he in the perfect place at the perfect time?
You're either really lucky.
Yeah.
Seriously, if you get someone who's seen 1 or 2, it's a big deal. This is crazy.
Yeah.
He has hair that was sent to a specialist in some college that said it was unknown. Yeah, I bet it disappeared after that too.
That's having some faith, Amelia. Way to go.
No, but that's the government, right? We don't really know if anyone's ever captured a
so-
Bigfoot, or if anyone's ever found one that is deceased. We don't know. We
don't
would
know.
never find
Which
out.
leads me to the next question. Do government know about them? They must, if they're protecting them. I mean, you can't kill them. You can't hunt them or hurt them. So why would do you think they're interested in them?
Yeah, I mean,
Government?
Rich Germeau, who had a sighting as an on-duty police officer in northwestern Washington State, talks about that. And Rich also has some military experience, but he talks about how if there was an apex predator, a humanoid apex predator wandering around in the wild, the U.S. government would want to know about it. And I completely believe that to be true.
I agree.
And then the next question is are they working with them to try and weaponize them? Could they be a super soldier? I mean, you could start going down a pretty deep, dark rabbit hole from there. But
You could almost see that, couldn't you?
Oh,
yeah,
If they're very intelligent.
I mean, the possibilities are endless. There's reports, many reports up here in the Northwest about bodies being removed from the destruction of Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. Many eyewitnesses to that account that the first responders were the U.S. military. Some of the first responders were U.S. military, and they went out and they got out the Sasquatch bodies before anybody else saw them. And
wow, really?
apparently they were sloppy, and there were some folks that saw these helicopters going over their house, and they looked up and they could see the bodies in the nets.
Wow.
And that story gets really interesting and really deep, and folks can search for those stories on YouTube if you type in Mount St. Helens Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
That is crazy.
Never
That's
heard that one.
crazy.
Yeah.
We're going to do a quick station ID. Actually, we're going to do it a little bit early.
Are we?
Yes, we are. Because I want to just get into the next leg of questions, so it might be a bit lengthy.
Absolutely. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and myself, Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 FM radio. Tonight, we've got Tobe Johnson and Brett Eichenberger in the house with us, talking all things Bigfoot. Stream or listen to our archives on the platform that you normally use. You can find us everywhere. Shout out and thank you. I don't have my coffee cup ready. To the amazing people at Folgers Coffee for fully sponsoring our show from day one. We love you and we thank you so much. Also, a huge thank you for lending his voice and his talent. Award-winning composer, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, for our intro and outro. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, and find him on Facebook and Instagram. Check him out. You can find and listen to his music there as well. He's got his little demos on there and his little clips of the incredible music that he creates.
All right. Thank you.
Folgers, yes, Michael.
I guess I want to get into, you have all eyewitness accounts, people, all walks of life. I know in the field of, let's say, ufology, we can go back thousands of years. And we find that the ancients were very willing to coexist with what they call their friends from the stars. They would emulate them. They would put petroglyphs everywhere. This was a thing. We didn't fear them. Somewhere along the line, we get into modern times, probably in the last 100 years, and all of a sudden they're the enemy. How is it with, Bigfoot? You have the North American Indians who revered them. Right? For the most part, they revered them. There was a healthy respect for them. They understood them. They don't seem to be as fearful. When I look at interviews with the indigenous people, like all over the world, they don't seem to have a fear of them the way most people do. Whoever wants it.
I'll touch on that a little bit.
Okay.
I don't think there's a fear at all in many tribes across North America. I think it's a cultural respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, the tribes that we feature from the Northwest, from, British Columbia on down to Oregon, they thought of them as another tribe in the forest. And, there's some stories and anecdotes of them trading salmon and doing things. There's also stories of the Bigfoot playing pranks on them. And I think there was an old article, I think it was in the Seattle Times or something in the 1920s, that talked about how they were kind of viciously humorous, if you will, but they would play these tricks. They would kidnap little kids from the village, and then they'd have to go rescue them from a mountaintop or something. Which that goes down a whole nother realm with, David Pilates and his research on missing 411.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Who David Pilates was also a Bigfoot researcher as well in his early days. So, yeah, I think that many of the tribes, as we feature in our film, have totems where a totem's the most important part of the totem is the bottom of the totem, and they'll or story poles, as some cultures call it. And a lot of those totems will have a Sasquatch at the bottom. There are many tribes that have them in their dances and in their ceremonies. There's a tribe, I believe, on Vancouver Island that thinks that they may have mixed DNA with a Sasquatch.
Now that would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are some rumors. I was told a story about I think it was Todd Neese that told me a story about how there was a hybrid Sasquatch man up in like Alberta or something who
Europe too, like Russian areas as well. Yes.
Yeah, there was a woman in Russia. It's more of a famous story. I think there might even be a photo of her.
Yeah, there is.
So yeah, there's some interesting stuff out there. Now we're kind of going off a ledge here, but yeah, to answer your question, there's definitely respect. We've spent time with a tribe in the Midwest that has had them in their culture, and has worked with them for, hundreds of years. They told us a story that was almost unbelievable about how there was during the time of World War II, most of the men went off to the war and the women were left to fend for themselves in the Midwest of, the United States, just like Canada. There's brutal winters, and
Mhm.
these women would come out of their cabins and find chopped or broken pieces of firewood, set next to
Wow.
their cabin. So, there are
Wow.
stories of this kindness, this generosity, this humanity that we've come
Mhm.
across, regardless of whether it's native cultures or just ordinary humans.
Mhm. Right. Um, yeah, I've read all kinds of stories where people on their properties will just leave fruit out for, Bigfoot to come in and collect, and the Bigfoot will come back with pine cones, and they reciprocate. So, do you guys think that? Do we fear them? Do people have to fear them? Do you think? I'm
Tobe?
of the mind the same as you, Brett. So,
Mhm.
go ahead. Yeah.
I think it's a healthy respect for individuals, the same way that you would have if you walk down an alleyway. You don't know who you're going to meet that day. And because I think there's something else going on here with how they enter into our world,
Mm.
those doors allow other things to come through. And I don't know how to close one of those doors once they're open. I don't, maybe I have permission to do it. Maybe I have the power to do it. I'm just kind of crazy enough to want to see who comes through those doors. And I
Mm.
don't think it's always Bigfoot. So
I
you may be
agree.
surprised what you're going to get. As Forrest Gump says, it's a box of chocolates when you're dealing with Bigfoot. But
Exactly.
the Native
Exactly.
Americans revered this phenomena so greatly. One of the stories I tell is about a oral traditionalist from the Kalapuya tribe, a gal by the name of Esther Stutzman, lives it down here in Yoncalla, Oregon. And I wanted to put a group of Bigfooters together at a community college back in 2010, and she was one of them. But they take that subject so seriously. They're also rumored to be some of the last headbinders and longheads up through the Pacific Northwest as well. I actually had to wait 6 months to ask her because it was the wrong season to talk about Bigfoot. So, here I am putting on an event. It's going to be in such and such date, but because of the weighty subject I bring on hand, she took a good 6 months to think about it, and then to come to, I believe it was the spring season, in order for me to bring it up. So there's a whole different protocol when you're getting to know First Nations people. Just in
Mhm.
general, there's a different
Yes.
protocol. But then when you get
Yes.
into what's going on with Sasquatch, there's a million different. I don't know. I mean, I understand that they have a respect for Bigfoot, but there's also a million different excuses about what Bigfoot really is. Maybe they're a hairy brother, but maybe they're, according to some, the Tonaqua is a cannibal woman that throws children in her basket. So, I mean,
It's
that's
kind of
not
like the
something you want to
Krampus
hang out
thing.
with. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does that come from? Because that's a cross pollination issue. Just like, when you started getting into Sasquatch, you also have to look at the other traditions of what are trolls, these big giants that live under bridges and things like that. So
Mhm.
if you dig back far enough, you're going to look up to the Sistine Chapel and you're going to start seeing images of Sasquatch as well.
Yeah, it's true. How many bits of folklore have crisscrossed
Hmm.
through different cultures? But realistically, when you think about it, like I think of Krampus, I think he could easily be a big
Hmm.
a Bigfoot. Same with big trolls. I mean, people truly believe that all of these beings exist. It's just through time. The fish that was this big that ended up, oh, is this big because it's oral history, right? It changes, even though it's pretty general and it should stay the same. I'm sure it gets added to as it makes its way down through generations. Um, so basically, where do you go from here with this? Because you can't just do something like this and research it to the point, like it's one of those things that you almost have to keep going with, because until, like, it's not like we just have. I mean, some people do claim, there's a guy in the US who claims he does have a Bigfoot. I tend to laugh. I mean, I laugh. I shouldn't, but maybe I do, because it just seems a little bit far-fetched to me that you would have a Bigfoot in your freezer. But
I was just going to say that. Is that the one in his freezer? He's on YouTube.
No, this is a guy that carts out, like,
right.
He makes studio feet, and he brings out the feet and sets them on the barn table,
Right,
and
right.
has the
But
head that he brings out. Yeah.
yeah, and he brings these pieces and stuff.
Mhm.
But then there have been other people who have claimed, no, they did shoot one and they buried it under leaves, and then they went back and took video, like probably a year later, and you could see bits of fur. But my question is like, why do they not ever just hand them in? Like, the world wants to know. I mean, if you actually have one, or you actually shot one, well, like, mind you, I guess the federal law says you shouldn't. You could get yourself, it's pretty much murder. So that might answer my own question. But, where do you go from there? Because if you don't have it, if you don't have a body, how can you come up with something remotely close to being definitive, if there's such a thing?
I mean, if it's about proof, it's a conversation to have. But if it's about experience, it's a different conversation, because now you're dealing in the world of moving into the identity, the relationship of it all without the proof. And the proof is, I get it. Like, I go out with cameras, I go out with digital recorders,
Yeah.
but you kind of have to get in the frame of mind, and maybe Brett can speak on this too, as a filmmaker, is you have to be in the frame of mind that you're creating an album, kind of a strange family album of a new
Right.
friend, and your
Right.
relationship growing. If you look at your phone as being able to seduce and capture evidence, like I say, they know that's coming, either through telepathy or whatever they're doing. Their intuition is so great that they predict your motives. And that's something you hear all the time in the supernatural world, is that they know your intent. Whatever is happening here knows your intent. And I'll hand that off to Brett.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and you can kind of get into the the conversation about time and the constraints of time, and how do they know you're coming? This kind of gets into that realm of remote viewing and telepathy. It's like, the second you pull up to the trailhead and you get out of your car, do they just hone in on you and start monitoring you and just kind of know what you're doing? How do they understand what a camera does? If they're living out in the woods. I don't know. I mean, I kind of look at it like, my own personal view is, it's almost like, it's like Mars. Okay. So we've seen Mars, we've taken pictures of Mars, we've sent spacecrafts to Mars. We don't have a single Mars rock in our possession that we've brought back from Mars. No one's touched Mars. No one's landed on Mars. We know Mars is there, but for all intents and purposes, humans are Mars experiencers, or Venus experiencers, or whatever, And the further out in the universe we get, the more distance things are, and the less we know about them. And Bigfoot, I think, to me anyways, is kind of similar to that, because I mean, I don't need to be convinced, and sometimes it's me doing the laughing at skeptics, because if you really start looking at the loads and loads of evidence, first and foremost, the eyewitness accounts from credible folks out there is enough to convict if this was a trial, in my opinion. But there are experiencers out there that know the truth, and they may number in the hundreds of thousands. And I get it. I get why science wants a body. I get why, people, if they do have a body, they hold back. If you're the person that has that body, if you kill one, you manage to bring one home in the back of your pickup truck, all hell is going to break loose.
Oh, yes.
You are going to be known for the rest of your life as the man or the woman that discovered Bigfoot. And there are ramifications to that. It's like the guy that goes and buys a Powerball ticket or a lottery ticket every Saturday for 20 years, and he finally wins. And then he starts, getting phone calls from third cousins, wanting a loan.
Yeah.
And then he thinks to himself,
Yeah.
why did I even buy this thing? I want my life back.
Mhm.
So the ramifications of if a Bigfoot were to be discovered in a small mountain town in Oregon or Washington or British Columbia or what have you, people from all over the world would descend upon that town to see
Mhm.
where the Bigfoot came from or meet the man that shot it or whatever. So the publicity would just be out of sight. I mean, there's no question that when they're finally discovered, if you will, to modern science, that it will be one of the biggest discoveries in human history.
Mhm.
So that's the side of things I don't think a lot of people are talking about. They're just saying, "Oh, show me a picture, bring me a body," and moving on to the next thing.
Mm.
It will be sensational. It will be sensational, and many people won't care. Many
Mhm.
people won't care, and eventually we'll grow accustomed to it. It's kind of like what's happening with UFOs to a certain extent. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
deep. It's deep.
Yeah. Well, that's what Michael says. One example, Amelia.
Yep, thank you. It's
Yeah.
like ET bodies. They are very similarly almost impossible to collect. I appreciate your comment. I don't think I agree with that because I think there's a lot of ET bodies and there's a lot of beings
I agree.
underground and in yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, they just try to hide it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Tamara says Scott Carpenter already did DNA study on Bigfoot and wrote a book on it.
I can speak on that.
Good.
Scott Carpenter, I believe, is a part of the Melba Ketchum study, which was really spearheaded by Rich Germeau, who's in the documentary, this ex-cop that we've been talking about. And the Melba Ketchum study says a lot of data. A lot of the data was shot down by traditional scientists, but the main thing that happens with Bigfooters and DNA is that it always comes back contaminated by humans.
Mm.
And in particular, contaminated on the male side. So as far as the Ketchum study, the bullet points are is that they can recognize the female DNA, but they cannot recognize the male side of the DNA.
That's
and so
interesting.
why is that? And I think that's what science needs to prepare to answer. You may have more UFO questions when you get to these Bigfoot answers. I think you might.
Yeah, I believe that. I think a lot of people lean that way as well, just because you do see these orbs of light. There are stories of them just disappearing, footsteps stop, gone. In the middle of like nowhere, so where they go. I find that absolutely fascinating. But there's also that aspect where I think people, and when you're getting into ufology, paranormal, I always say otherworldly. I do prefer that term. I think we forget sometimes that these are beings. They bleed as well. We're dimensional beings, technically speaking, with different levels or, dimensions within our one space. So we fall into that as well. And if someone comes along and shoots you, it's going to end your life. So even if they are a dimensional being, it doesn't make them any less real. I guess it takes us back to the question that we had at the beginning of the show. Can they jump time?
I don't know, but I think let's say they
Right? I
can,
don't know.
whenever they do what they do, let's say that they can
Yeah.
do all these spectacular things that we're guessing they can do.
Yeah.
I think they have to abide a bit, if not mostly, by the physical laws of where they are at that time. However, they can play with it. It seems as though they can play with things. We had evidence of that at the Al Moon Lab, where we'd find impressions in the gravel, and it was almost as though they're playing with a vibrational frequency in order to sink the rocks down into the hard pan.
Frequencies. Yep.
So there's ancillary evidence of that from our story, but people say they have shot them and that they have wounded them or killed them. I've heard incredible encounters in Sasquatch Chronicles out here in Vancouver, Washington, of people that have shot juvenile Sasquatch, and had very detailed responses from the alpha male of what happened to them, and you can hear their voice trembling. And then suddenly a cleanup team shows up at the spot and takes care of all the evidence as though it's never happened. So there's all these incredible stories, but that's all they are.
Right. Well, that's why I posed the question that leaned more towards you as a being out like a field researcher, because this is becoming a thing again. I've noticed there's a lot of new shows coming up in this next season of new shows. It's not all just paranormal, but it looks like people are getting into Bigfoot research. I'm like, oh, are we going through another cycle again? This is going to be the next thing. So what are your thoughts to that? Like, do you work with other researchers, or are you just like, oh God, not again? Not another one. Because I find, like I said, when you're doing documentaries and they are supposed to be really educational, it's really hard, because I'll use the paranormal as an example. There are a lot of couch investigators out there. And now with social media, it's not hard to be a group. And I commend everyone who comes together and can work in unity in any field. Some people don't have places they can go visit. They don't have groups they can join, but sometimes if you don't do your homework, a lot of damage gets done also. And that applies to any field.
Brett, talk about the scripted nature of television, because a lot of people don't know how that works.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. I've got all kinds of different thoughts about how reality show producers work, and I've kind of dipped my toes in that world a little bit, so I understand. And I also have a family member that's been a producer of reality shows for 20 years, some very popular shows. So they're looking for a little bit different response from the audience than like a documentary is looking for, and we wanted to do something that really could help find its way into the standard, what's the word I'm looking for, the general public, I guess you could say, the folks out there that have a passing interest in Bigfoot or what have you. That's an audience we wanted to get to, because we want to start expanding the conversation. But going back to reality TV shows, a show like Expedition Bigfoot, I think for the most part has good intentions. But at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line, and they need to be making money. And, I've been told a few times that producers and studios, when I say studios, I mean networks, are afraid to show too much because they're afraid the audience can't handle it. So
they have a
in
formula,
other words,
right?
yeah, there's a formula, but in other words, if they were to really actually capture a Bigfoot, they would show it on TV, because, for one, that would be the end of the series, right? Two is they're just afraid that it would freak people out. The infamous radio show War of the Worlds that Orson Welles did so many years ago was a massive social experiment that I think sociologists are still researching to this day. I mean, we found out so much about the general population from that. Now, obviously, we live in a different time with the internet and, all these faked videos and everything else. But, I think that people need to be really careful when they watch these shows. They need to really kind of watch it with an open mind and realize that, you can do a lot and you can say a lot with editing. It's extremely easy to manipulate what somebody is saying or doing in some of these shows. So I mean, just be careful is all I can say. Go out there. The most important thing is to go find somebody in your local area that is a Bigfoot researcher. And, for the most part, I think these people would be more than happy to do a cup of coffee with you. Just like Tobe did, with his river guide. Don't be afraid, ask questions, and then go out and do the research yourself. And most of it, to be honest with you, is going to be pretty boring. You're going to be sitting around or walking around or camping in the forest and
with the black flies and the mosquitoes and
exactly.
Absolutely. That's true.
This phenomena will come up when you least expect it. Tobe can also expand upon
Yeah.
that.
I mean, it's about, yeah, sure. It's about 90% of sitting around. I'm sure when you're in a house that's active or you're, working a case, it's a lot of downtime and BS. And it seems like the phenomena is attracted to those downtimes. It seems like the phenomena is attracted to laughter. And I always call it the tuning fork method, where you have to have both sides of the tuning fork in order to get the vibe going. And so you need that other person that is the attractant, and it's hard to narrow down in a group who that is. It may not even be your spouse. It may be your spouse's friend, and then you're having the awkward moment of trying to get your spouse's friend to come out in the woods with you. It's just like, what's up? Like, well, they got the vibe going. So no offense, but
yeah,
I mean, it gets into the right. You know what I'm talking about? The relationship aspect of this can get a little bit confusing.
No, I agree. It is the same in research. I find that I have gotten more things happening just by sitting down and speaking with the homeowners and not doing anything. They they just sort of get curious, and like you play back recordings and you got like a boatload of stuff because everybody's got something to say. Doesn't really matter which side of the veil you're on, apparently.
Right.
But I think it would be like that as well, even with this type of research, because they're just as curious about you as you are about them. How many stories do you hear where people are in their tents and they're just down for the night, and they've got things rustling around, going through the coolers or going through bags, and just watching the tent? And I think they are curious, and I do believe that they are telepathic. Therefore, they know exactly why you're there. I think I tend to get more concerned about people who really delve deep into these TV shows. Like, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a group and we're going to go out and do this. And I always say, educate yourself. Never stop learning. Learn one new thing every day or something that you're interested in, because it could ultimately save your life. You can't just go traipsing around the woods at night. That's another misconception. It's the same thing in the field of the paranormal. It doesn't just happen at night, people. It's 24/7. A lot of sightings happen during the day.
Yeah.
Right? So
Absolutely.
They do the night thing just for the effect on the shows. They're not really.
No, but people go out at night too and use your cool equipment. Put on my night goggles. Okay.
Yeah. I have my own equipment, so.
So that's something else I don't understand. You're sitting there and you're with one of the shows we were just talking about. They got big flashlights out, and if I want to be found, it's the last place I gravitate to is that crazy flashlight. Is that just, again, a show effect, or do you go in really thinking, I'm going to use like a FLIR, I'm going to use like night vision goggles, and I'm trying to just blend in a little bit and not like.
So they have to prove it scientifically, because otherwise your best tool would be bringing in a medium.
Yeah.
Well, they did bring in a remote viewer. Funny that. But anyway, so as we get a little bit closer to the end of the show, tell everybody, where can they find your documentary? Where can they watch it? Where can they go?
Okay. Well, we are on Amazon.com. You can rent it on YouTube.
I have Amazon.
You can. It's on iTunes. I think I actually think it might not be on Amazon in Canada. I think it might only be on YouTube.
Of course it's not.
Canada.
That's okay. I have both accounts.
Me too.
Yeah. And
I'm just going to
YouTube
belly it because I can.
Voodoo. I don't know if you guys have Voodoo up there, but VUDU.
Hulu? No, Michelle. Do we?
No Hulu. Not
No
yet.
Hulu.
No.
Voodoo.
Voodoo, no.
Hulu, yes.
Voodoo.com.
Hulu we have. Hulu's
Vimeo is another one that is out there.
Nothing a good IP
Google
engine
Play.
fix.
Yeah, exactly.
Oops, did I say that out loud?
Well, she lives on the border, Brett, so she can pick up anything. I'm a little bit further away.
Okay. Okay, so there are options, basically.
Many options. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not hard to find.
Okay, and how
iTunes
can
is great. Everybody has that.
and how can everybody find you guys? If they have a story they want to share, or if they have questions for you.
Probably the best way to find at least us, the Bigfoot documentary folks, is bigfootdoc.com. And
Okay.
it's just like it sounds, BigfootDoc.com. And I just want to clarify that we are not Bigfoot doctors. It is a Bigfoot documentary.
Right.
To throw that out there, that was a bad joke. Anyways, but there's a
I loved
contact
it.
page.
It was great. Yeah.
Thanks.
I have a lot of
It's getting a
podiatry
little
questions.
punchy around here. But yeah,
Tough
you
crowd.
can just contact us through the page. We have a Facebook page too, a Flashy Beauty Bigfoot Revealed on Facebook. Come
Okay.
find us, like our page. And if you like our page, you're gonna be seeing a lot more. We'll have some special features coming up here soon. You can stay kind of in touch with us as we start working on the sequel, which we've already started on. So
Okay, that was my next question.
yeah,
So part
we've
2
got some
is
more. So part 2 should be coming out next year.
okay.
I would say probably within the next 8 to 12 months.
So you guys going to come back on the show and talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you let me know when that's coming up, because we book at least that. So
Okay.
yeah. So if you know for sure, and you give us some notice, we could put you in like even just before the release or something.
Cool. Yeah.
Because we have
we'd love
millions of
to.
people who actually listen. So it
Nice.
would,
I know.
yeah.
Who knew?
Who knew? Yeah, we were like, what? Really? Yeah. So we're also nominated for a People's Choice Award, second year. Yeah, I know, we're
Wow.
quite surprised.
Wow.
So you have
It's a huge
basically what that
honor.
does is it brings, other people to listen to the show, maybe who've never heard of the show before, and because they go check out all the nominees and things like that. So you'll have extra people listening to this interview, and we hope that it takes them to your documentary. I certainly am going to go and watch it, and it was really great having you guys on. It was actually really nice to delve into this a little bit without a lot of the typical stereotypical things that we all hear.
Very,
So
very interesting. Thank you so much, both
Yes.
of you.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Oh,
Really
our
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
We look forward to the next one.
Appreciate it. Take care. Have a great
Chop
night.
chop.
Thank
You
you.
All right.
too. Thank you. Good
Thank you
night.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Oh gosh. Well, that was awesome. And that went just way too quick. The guys were great, and I'm looking forward to seeing this. I'm actually going to watch it this weekend. So we obviously have come to the end of another amazing segment. I thoroughly enjoyed this segment. It was such a wealth of information. The guys are so laid back. It made it that much more fun. So big thank you to Tobe and Brett for joining us tonight. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring us tonight and every night. And from what I understand, they are, I guess they've signed on for another year. So we love you too. And thank you, Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, for also being a sponsor. So please remember, guys, wherever you're listening to the show, if you make your way over to YouTube and you like the show, whether it's our Outer Realm page on YouTube or International Public Radio, UFO Paranormal Radio, UFO Gods, Extraterrestrials, Outer Realm, please subscribe. It really does help us, and we appreciate you all for doing it. So thank you. Also, if you want to drop us a line, please do so at the Outer Realm Contact at gmail.com. Again, the Outer Realm Contact at gmail.com. Tomorrow night, we're bringing back Sean Williamson and Wayne Murphy, and they're going to be discussing their discovery in Wisconsin, which is the Knights Templar here in North America. And let me tell you something. There is stuff, obviously, they're going to be able to say. There's going to be things that they're not going to be able to say. They are watched pretty closely by a certain TV show, not to name names, right? And very known for their wood. I'll leave it there. And I know, but it's a thing. But who are, they're also very interested in this find. So we have to be very careful. But it will be history changing. And there's so many things, because we sit behind the scenes. We know what's been found so far. We know the research that's been done so far. And all I have to say is, holy crap, it's going to be mind-blowing when it comes out. So I don't know how much you're going to be able to say, but I do know that they're going to come up and they're really going to make this pretty pretty darn cool. So I'm really looking forward to it. So if you have any questions, just might want to go in, because this is actually going to be a pre-record. So maybe just go into under their banner,
like right now.
And put some questions in there, because we will check it out and we can ask them. So until then, behave yourselves tomorrow night. We will be in chat. We will be able to put up your comments, and the guys get to go back and watch it after that, which is great. And they do. And I've gotten a lot of compliments on the fact that they have so many people interested. A lot of our guests are really, really grateful for that.
Wayne might even be there while the show is on, because he's still on this side of the world. It's Sean.
He is. Exactly. So everybody, good night. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you tomorrow night.